Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm just giving everyone some time to come in. This is Robin Kinney, and we are doing part 2 of the top 10 mistakes that new podcasters make. Yesterday, we did part 1, and we did a countdown of the top 5. And if you weren't on yesterday, those top 5, let me just get my notes here. Those top 5 were a poorly formatted show. So your show is all over the place and doesn't have any structure or an outline. Number 2 was not using the right tools, not knowing which microphone to use, not knowing how to edit. If you choose to edit yourself and you don't choose to outsource that, not knowing how to use the right tools was number 2. Number 3 here. Let's see. Get my notes here. Oh dear. Let's see. 2 was poorly formatted. 1 was not having the right. Hi, cousin. I see your comment. So number 3 was no niche. So not knowing specifically who you're talking to or who your podcast is going to benefit most. Number 4 was not enough social media presence. So we talked about that. And then number 5 was not knowing how to repurpose and getting the most out of your content. Okay. So that was yesterday's top 5. Today, we're going to do the second half of our list of the top 10 mistakes that new podcasters make. Yes, I am still at home, although the studio is technically open. We've had a few sessions there to our existing clients. But I'm just choosing to do this from my dining room table. So I hope that everyone is still staying safe and being masked up. Okay, this is not over. We still need to be careful and be aware of wearing a mask. You're 6 feet and washing your hands. We're still washing hands. Okay, so we're doing the second half of our top 10 mistakes that new podcasters make. And I created this list because as a recording studio owner over the last 5 years, I've seen podcasters come and go. And I can almost pinpoint which podcasters are going to be successful and which ones are going to just fade into the background. So I created this list so that you, a new podcaster, or even an aspiring podcaster, can benefit from other people's mistakes. Okay, that's the holy grail. You want to benefit from other people's mistakes and learn from their mistakes. So this is a top 10 list. We did the first 5 yesterday, and we're going to cover the second 5 today. And just so you know, we do have an online course that we launched a couple of months ago called How to Podcast with Purpose. I am going to put the link right now in the comments so that anyone who is just clueless and you're just not sure how to get that podcast off the ground. If you can hear, we're getting the grass is getting cut right now. So just ignore that background noise. It's fine. If you're interested in launching a podcast and you don't know where to start, we put together this course. It's an on-demand course, which means you can do it when you're up at 3 a.m. or mid-afternoon. Whenever you are ready, it is ready for you. And what I love about the course is that, yes, there's a lot of written materials and downloads and templates, but it's a video series. So it's just me walking you through the process step by step of launching a podcast, from cover art to connecting with your audience to monetization strategies. Everything is covered in our How to Podcast with Purpose course. So I put the link in the chat there. So if you are interested, you can go ahead and click on that and get started today. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the second half of our top 10 list of mistakes that new podcasters make. Okay, so number 6 is get your legal house in order. So what does that mean? That means that just because you want to use audio clip or some music from your favorite artist, you can't just put it into your podcast and not expect any repercussions. You know, there's a little thing called copyright. So you can't just put in music that you want to use. You cannot just use the title of another podcast, because as podcasting is becoming more popular, now you have the music industry looking more into it of who's using our music, and in most cases is using it without permission from us. So what that means is you need to be aware of the legal ramifications of podcasting. Things like securing the name of your podcast is something that I think every podcaster should do. And this goes beyond just securing the domain name and the social media handles. I mean, actually having a copyright on the legal name of your podcast. And actually, this is something that is my topic for the upcoming Detroit Podcast Festival coming up this October. And we're going to be talking about the legal issues when it comes to podcasting, from your name to music to content to who owns your content. All of that is going to be covered, at that conference. Okay. Also, when it comes to legal issues, I've seen some people who, work with a lawyer to make sure that all of their information has a copyright on it. You would never want someone to, maybe launch a competing podcast with your name. All right. So you want to protect yourself. So there are ways in order for you to do that. Okay. So getting your legal house in order was number 6. Okay. Love you, cousin. So the number 7 of our top 10 list of top mistakes that new podcasters make, we just covered about legal issues and not making sure that your podcast is legally protected. Anything that you're pouring your heart and soul and your money in, you want to make sure it's protected so someone else can't come in and benefit from all the work that you've done, right? So number 7 is not being purpose driven. What does that mean? That means you're launching a podcast because you just want to talk about something. You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know why you're talking to them. You don't have an end goal. I always tell people, begin with the end in mind, meaning, do you want this podcast to evolve into a brand? Is the podcast supporting an existing business or service that you already have? If so, you want to make sure that everything is connected. Everything is circling back to the initial purpose of your podcast. So you don't want to just launch a podcast because everybody is podcasting. Okay. And recently, Apple Podcasts announced that there are more than 1 million podcasts listed on their directory. So there's a podcast talking about everything. I don't share that to discourage you. I share that to make sure that you are specific with your goal of your podcast so that you can have a niche, so that you can stand out. Okay. So number 7 was not being purpose driven with your podcast. And this is something that we go in detail in our course, Podcasting with Purpose. And I put the link in the chat. So whenever you're ready for that course, it's on demand and it's a series of videos, nothing formal, just me walking you through the process of everything from equipment to creating the structure of your podcast to connecting with an audience. So when you're ready for that, it's our Podcast with Purpose course. Okay, let's continue. Number 8 of the top 10 mistakes that new podcasters make. Too much emphasis on stats. Okay, so this may sound counterproductive of what a podcast is all about. Of course, you want to reach an audience. Of course, you want it to have a purpose and actually do something. But I think when you concentrate on your numbers too much, you miss the whole point of connection. I don't know about you, but I would rather have a smaller audience that's engaged, that feels empowered, and that I'm truly connecting with than having 1 million downloads and people are just listening and they're not really supporting and we're not really creating a community, if you understand what I'm saying. So when you emphasize the stats too much, you miss the purpose of it, because someone could, be listening on a regular basis. So maybe your numbers aren't that high, but your impact is. So that's something to think about. Impact over just stats. All righty. Stats are important, especially if you have the goal of having sponsors and you wanted to, of course, support an existing business or a brand. So you want to be able to leverage those stats, but that's not the only thing that you should be concentrating on. Okay, so that was number 8 of our top 10 mistakes that new podcasters make. Number 9, okay, we're going to continue on. Number 9, not looking at ways to monetize your podcast, okay? And this really ties into everything that I've talked about previously with knowing the purpose of your podcast, beginning with the end in mind and giving the podcast kind of like a call to action. What do you want this podcast to do? What do you want your listeners and your subscribers to think, feel, or do after each episode? Okay, so that needs to be very clear, very top of mind, and looking at monetization strategies really forces you to keep that in mind. So if you want to monetize it, meaning you want to make money off this podcast, and some people, it's not that important. I've worked with some podcasters where they're really doing their podcast to educate. They really want to share their knowledge, build community. But other people will say to me, hey, this is a business and I need to make money off of this podcast. So those two different types of podcasts are structured very differently. If you're looking at monetizing your podcast, one of the easiest ways to do that is with sponsors and advertisers, okay? So if you're looking at sponsors and advertisers, some of the key questions that they're going to ask you is, who's your audience? Because they want to make sure that your audience is aligned with your audience, okay? So let's say you have a podcast and it's all about women entrepreneurs and you want to monetize it. So you approach a sponsor. What type of sponsor should you approach? You should approach a sponsor who wants to speak to women entrepreneurs, since that's your audience. That can be anyone from co-working spaces to legal services to accounting services, anyone that includes women entrepreneurs as part of their customer base can be a potential sponsor. So your goal is to create, a packet of information, showcasing your podcast, what your podcast is all about, talking about your audience. So it's clear to the sponsor and advertiser, hey, yep, their audience looks a lot like my audience. I want to advertise. That's really what advertisement is all about. But there are other ways to monetize your podcast than just sponsorships and advertisers. You can do what we call affiliate links. Affiliate links are when you make an agreement with another business or service or product and say, I'm going to give an affiliate link or affiliate code in my show notes, or I'm going to mention it during the podcast. And for every customer that uses this link or uses this code, I get a percentage of the sale, or I get a certain amount of money. That's another way. So as listeners are listening to your podcast and you say, hey, if you are getting ready for the fall school year and you need to update your home office, here's an organizational service. And if you mention my podcast, you get 10% off. Okay. So that's another way. And what I like about affiliate links and that kind of structure is that it really promotes collaboration. And collaboration is going to help you grow. Okay. And monetize. Other monetization can include, just quick merchandise. So I've seen podcasters that have hats, they have cell phone brackets and, cases, coffee mugs, all sorts of things. Any type of merchandise that has your logo on it, you can sell it at events or sell it on your website. And that's another monetization strategy. So there's a ton of other ones, but those are probably the top ones that I've seen new podcasters get into. We do go more into detail about all of the different monetization strategies, and we really try to provide as many resources as possible in our Podcast with Purpose course. And I put the link in the comments there. So when you're ready, that course really goes more in detail than what I'm going. Okay. So we've been doing our top 10 list of mistakes that new podcasters make. Okay. So I'm going to do just a recap before we get to number 1. Okay. Top 10 mistakes new podcasters make. Number 10 was a poorly formatted show, not having an outline that is consistent and that makes sense to the listener. Number 2 was not knowing the right tools to use. There's so many different microphones and audio editing software and headphones. You can really get lost. So not having the right tools or knowing how to really leverage them is a mistake that I've seen a lot of podcasters make. Number 3 was not knowing your niche, thinking, oh, my podcast is for everyone. Everyone is going to benefit from it. That's a big no. Your niche is where you can drill down and really be specific on who is going to benefit from your podcast and why. The more clarity that you have going into podcasting, the higher the likelihood of your success. That simple. Number 4, not enough social media presence. And when we talked about this, I also shared that you don't necessarily have to be on all of the social media platforms. Your audience may only be on Facebook and not Twitter and Instagram, or your audience may be on Instagram. So you don't have to be everywhere and drive yourself crazy, okay? You want to pick the social media platform that makes the most sense for you and then show up and keep showing up and keep showing up. Number 5 was repurposing and getting the most out of your content. So when I talked about social media, yes, you want to continue showing up, but don't overwhelm yourself. And there's a way that you can repurpose content to make the appearance that you're there all the time when you're really not. Okay. Number 6 was get your legal house in order. Yes, there are legal issues when it comes to podcasting. Dealing with copyrights and permission of intellectual property is very important and should be taken very seriously. So that's another mistake that I've seen new podcasters make. Number 7 was not being purpose driven, not beginning with the end in mind. So have a purpose and a mission for your podcast. If it's just creating awareness for your nonprofit, that's a purpose. If it's to support your business, that's a purpose. Or if it's just to entertain, it doesn't have to be related to any type of sales or numbers. Say, hey, I just want to bring joy in the world. That's a purpose. Very clear. Number 8, too much emphasis on stats. You don't want to get so overwhelmed when it comes to statistics and downloads. You want to concentrate on the impact that you're making. And sometimes impact cannot be measured in numbers. Okay. And then number 9, we just covered not looking at ways to monetize your podcast. We just talked about that. So there's a ton of different ways to monetize your podcast, from advertising and sponsors to merchandise, to affiliate links, to live events and showcases. It list goes on and on. I'm going to pause here to see if anyone has any questions. If so, just put it in the chat. If I don't see any questions, we will just go on to the top mistake that new podcasters make. Okay, no questions. So let's go on to number 10. And this is the top mistake that I've seen new podcasters make. Drum roll. Inconsistency. You start, you stop, you start, you're doing great, you get overwhelmed, so you drop it again. Inconsistency is so common in the podcasting world that we actually have a term for it, and it's called pod fading. That means you launch your podcast and then it just fades into the background because after that 3rd or 4th episode, you checked out, you became uninspired, you became overwhelmed, or in a lot of cases, life just happens, okay? And you get distracted and other things take priority, which is fine. So there are ways to overcome inconsistency and really support yourself so that as you may get busy or uninspired, you're already protected. And a way to do that is to create systems so that you're not doing so much with the podcast. You know, for most podcasters, you don't have someone who is, you know, researching guests and booking guests and editing the show itself and promoting. It's a lot, you know, it's a lot that goes into podcasting. It's not just sitting down and talking. And I think that really lends itself to the inconsistency for a lot of folks. They get overwhelmed. They think this is too much, and then they just stop. And we don't want that to happen. You know, there are so many people who need to hear what you have to say, and what you have to say is so important. So a way to overcome inconsistency is to go back to what I said previously, begin with the end in mind. Also, I really encourage podcasters to do what is called batch recording. Batch recording is when you sit down and you record more than one episode at a time, okay? So you sit down and let's say your episode is 20 minutes long and you commit one day a week, I'm going to record 3 episodes. So on weeks where you really don't feel like recording, you already have some episodes ready to go. That comes in because sometimes you just don't feel like it. Okay. And that's with anyone. I've seen podcasters that get 6 figures downloads and say, sometimes I just don't feel like it. So when you batch record, it really protects you so that you can take time away, but still have that consistency of a weekly episode or however, whatever schedule that you have for your podcast itself. Okay, so that was the number one mistake of the top 10 mistakes that new podcasters make. My name is Robin Kinney. These are sessions that we like to share as often as possible when it comes to podcasting. I thank everyone for tuning in to our to the PodFest Global Summit that I spoke about, getting organized as a new podcaster, and we are getting ready for more virtual summits and conferences this fall. So make sure that you've liked our Facebook page and you're following us on Twitter and Instagram. And also check out our website, motorcitywoman.com, where we share not only resources and some of our educational products and courses, but you can also look at what services we do provide, whether in studio or virtually. Okay. So if there aren't any more questions, I thank everyone for tuning in today and make it a great day. I'm going to put my email in here so that if you have any questions after we end, boom. I can always be reached at robin@motorcitywoman.com. Okay. One thing that I am committed to is supporting underrepresented voices in broadcasting and podcasting. So that's a personal commitment of mine. So if you have questions and you don't see it we have a video library on our YouTube channel of just resources, tips, and tools. You can always just email me. Okay. So if not any more questions, I'm just going to pause here. Now I'll just give a thumbs up. Thanks everyone for tuning in on this wonderful Wednesday. And it's a beautiful day out here in Detroit. And I will see everyone next time. Bye.